Hey, this is Garrett with Too Hot to Handle. We are working on making chili today. I have a chili cook-off with my church, and I want to make two versions of this. One, my regular version, which means very, very spicy, and another for everybody else to eat, where it's going to be eatable for even people that don't like spicy food at all. Now, my personal opinion is chili tastes better when it has some level of spice. And that means it could have a couple of jalapenos in it, or it could have a couple Carolina Reapers in it. But some level is better than none, in my opinion. So, what we're using, because it's a chili cook-off, and I need more than just a normal meal size, I have 4 packages of ground venison. This is a deer I got last year. So we got 4 packs of these. These are about 1.5 pounds each. I've got 3 onions cupped so far. I need to cup 1 more. I'm going to put 4 onions in. 5 cloves of garlic. I thinly slice it. 4 cans of Rotel. I normally use hatch green chili ones or the hot ones, but just so it's not overly spicy for anyone or any kids out there, I just got the original. 1 beer. Generally, my favorite beers for chili is a brown ale, but you know, whatever you have in your fridge is probably going to be fine. It's not going to be a big difference. Lots of paprika. I'm going to use 1 can of corn, whole kernel. Turmeric, just a little bit of that. It doesn't need a lot of turmeric. A good bit of cumin. I also like to do the whole cumin seeds. Of course, salt. And very, very importantly, I have some homemade tallow. This is left over from steaks and brisket, but we're going to be using that because with venison, there's basically no fat in it. So it needs some type of fat just to give it the proper amount of greasiness to it. So I'm going to grab a knife. And what we're going to do is I'm just going to open up these packages. I defrosted them in the fridge overnight, so they may still be mildly icy in the middle, but they should be overall, well, cold but unfrozen. So for this first part, you'll see I actually have 2 pots on the stove right now. The reason for that is although I want to cook in 1 pot, for the browning part, I'm going to separate it into 2, just so that we can brown the meat a little bit quicker. When you have, you know, call it close to 6 pounds of meat browning in 1 pot, parts of it can be overcooked, so it'll get a little bit drier, parts will be undercooked, which you definitely don't want. So it's just easier to split that into 2 pots. Now, after it's all browned, I'm going to combine it to the big pot, put everything in except for the chilies, and then once I get everything mixed in, I'm going to separate that again, put some of it back in this smaller one for the spicy chili, which we're going to try before the chili cook-off for a couple reasons. First, I'll know if I have to adjust the seasoning by a little bit. And second, well, it's lunchtime. All right. One thing I would like to note as well is I got this beer out of the fridge a while ago. I'm trying to get to room temperature before we put in the chili, just so that it doesn't kind of give a cold shock to the hot browned meat. You know, it just cooks better that way. At the end of this, there will be no alcohol in my chili. It all evaporates out. So I'm gonna take this over here. All right, I'm going to see my kitchen for a bit. So I'm going to fast forward through a lot of this browning process once we get things started. There we go. So first step is I turn on to a fairly high heat. Get some of this tallow out. Just scoops out like butter. I want to get that nice and melted in there, just so you can see about how much I use. Now, that tallow is going to add the extra fat we need in there, but you can overdo it. The problem with overdoing is it might make your stomach feel a little bit queasy the next day. It won't make your chili taste bad. In fact, it'll taste delicious. Tallow is a very tasty fat, and it's very healthy for you too. So this is a lot healthier than, say, a rendered fat from pork. It's a lot healthier than basically, any of the fats out there, any of the oils, so it's a very healthy choice. I'd say it's probably on par with like olive oil. All right. Whoop, hot. We're going to turn that down just a little bit. This is a high burner. I'm just going to chop this meat up. Like I thought, it's still mildly frozen in the middle. That doesn't matter much. As long as you can chop through it easily, it'll brown fairly evenly. I just like to cut into small little bricks, such as that. And then once I get it cut up, I'm going to start putting some seasonings in. We're going to turn this down just a little bit until we get everything cut up. That way nothing gets burnt. Since I'm doing 2 pots, just have to slow my roll a little bit here. All right, so I put seasoning on in 2 different parts of my chili. While the meat's browning, and a little bit later on, after we're mixing all the ingredients together as well. Again, I can a lot of times kind of tell what's going to be needed by the smell. If it just smells absolutely delicious, you probably don't need to add much more. The risk is if you add too much seasoning, it gets powdery. And it can be almost offensive if you put too much on. This larger pot of chili here, it is much less frozen than this one. I almost wish these pots were reversed because it's easier to do the more frozen one in the larger pot because it won't make as much of a mess. But that's just not a big deal. At this point, I want to put some salt. I don't need to overly salt this because of the other seasonings I want to put in. I'm going to put a little bit of salt. I'm going to mix it up. I'm going to chop this one up a little bit more. Yeah, if I tried to brown all this meat in one pot, it would not work well. It would definitely cause some issues there. Put a little bit more salt on. That's probably all the salt we're going to need for this entire pot. Like I said, I do put a lot of seasonings in, a lot of paprika, a lot of cumin, and I do throw in a couple packets of seasoning towards the end as well that I didn't get out in the beginning, but I will have those out. in a bit. Turn the heat down just a little bit. I'm down to medium heat on this big pot. All right. So I'll throw some paprika in there. There's almost no paprika. I'm just finishing this off so y'all can see about how much. I want to add maybe a little bit more later, but let's see how that goes for now. Gotta take the seal off. With the dullest knife ever. I'm going to put a similar amount over here. The main thing is I want to add about the same amount of ingredients to both of them. That way they're consistent throughout, and one bite won't be significantly different than the next, right? Some people like to put in the seasoning with the fat at the front end and just let it simmer mildly at like a low heat for about 15 minutes. It does change the flavor of the seasonings. I've tried it. I like a bit more of a bold flavor, so I like to put it on with the meat. Next thing we're putting on is cumin. I have this top open, so we're going to be very careful about that. I love cumin. I'm putting a good bit there. We're going to mix that in. Right, about the same amount here. You'll notice I do a lot of chopping because I just want to break the meat up into as small pieces as possible. That way there's not like a big chunk of meat when we bite into it later. Now there's one other ingredient I have not shown anyone yet. You're going to have to stay to, well, towards the second half of the video to see what that is. But it makes a huge difference in chili, whether you have a really good pot of chili or just a okay pot. Let's see. And I figured that out by mistake one day. Not by mistake, but just, fooling around. And, I normally don't cook for other people with this. This is normally 100% for me. Because my kids and wife won't eat deer for some reason. I mean, if you don't tell them that it's deer, they'll eat it, but they always know that when I'm making chili, it's deer. We're going to put just a little bit more paprika here. And I'm going to take my garlic. I want to be mixing some of this in here. I'm not putting all my garlic in yet, probably 2/3 of it. So y'all can see. I like some of it to cook in or a little bit earlier with the meat. I like some of it to be a little bit more a little bit more raw. That's just personal preference. I don't think it matters a ton, but you know, I'll do what we want to do. So if you were to put the garlic in later, I don't think it'll make a big difference. I just don't like to put it in too early with meat because I don't want it to get burnt. And if it's on the bottom of the pan for too long, it's going to get burnt. And burnt garlic tastes pretty bad. You can get it toasted, and that's good, but not. You don't want to get black. So it looks like about 70% of my meat is browned at this point. I am needing to cut one more onion, so we're just going to do that real quick. For cutting up the onions, they always make my eyes tear, but that's just part of dealing with food. I'm going to peel the outer layers of the skin off. That's kind of tougher. And as far as the color of the onion, I generally like to use either white or red. I compost, so I throw all my vegetable scraps in a bucket. When I do this, I like to kind of cut it in a grid-like pattern. And I just do as thin of a slice as I can get. It doesn't have to be perfect. This is all going to be cooked in. There's other people at the chili cook-off. They're going to be bringing fresh onions for the top, which is just great. Sure y'all see what I'm doing here. Sign gets double cut or anything, it just doesn't matter. You know, we're just trying to get these small enough pieces that they're not like a big chunk. You don't want to have a big chunk of anything in your chili anywhere. I had 3 onions at home. My wife went to go get me the last one at the store, so I couldn't prep those earlier. And we need 4 for this amount of meat. So let's go back over here. That is smelling delicious. Just so y'all can see, the fat in here is starting to turn golden. Mix that up, make sure that so we can get everything nice and brown, not just parts of it. Yeah, the paprika and cumin is what's changing the color of that. I'm gonna toss in one more ingredient here. I don't use a ton of turmeric, but I do like to use just a little bit. So this is turmeric. Don't get on your hands. It will stain your hands. And it'll take like 2 weeks to get rid of. This just gives it a little bit of color. I don't find the flavor to be that much different with or without turmeric. I just like the color it gives. Looks more appetizing in my opinion. but the flavor is not terribly strong. Make sure all this is nice and fine. You don't want a meatball chili. Simmer. The nice thing about having a little bit of tallow in here is it helps brown everything that's not touching the very bottom of the pot. Just kind of fries it a little bit. That's smelling really good, like really good. It's almost brown. We're just going to wait a minute. In fact, let me grab some seasoning packets. Generally for chili seasoning, I just use McCormick's Original Chili. I obviously add my own additional seasonings to it. I like a lot of flavor. All right, it's looking pretty brown. I don't see any pink, any red anywhere at this point. Most everything's chopped up very nicely. Here, so y'all can see. So, what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn this off for a moment. This is hot and greasy. I'm going to actually use pads. A lot of times I won't, but splash might make me drop something. All right, I got everything in one pot now. Now we're going to start adding the other stuff. So first, I'm going to add 4 onions. These aren't enormous onions, they're just normal size white onions. I'm going to add 4 cans of Rotel. Now, I want to turn the heat down a little bit too right now so it just starts to simmer. For the Rotel, I like to drain a little bit of the water off the top, just because. Let's open all 4 of these and go drain them out and pour them. Two, 3, 4. And I have an upset kid in the background. That's the great part of having a 3-year-old. You never know when they're going to start screaming. There's 2 more packets. I want to mix a little bit of this in so it doesn't make a huge mess in a little while. Because that powder can kind of puff up when you start to mix it until it gets wet. So I want to mix this all in, and that one split back into 2 pots to let simmer. One being a large pot. That's not going to be spicy. And that's for the chili cook-off. And another personal one for me, that's going to be very spicy. And I love spicy chili. I mean, it is. So the thing about chili is when you add spice to it, it doesn't like, it's not like being kicked in the face by spicy. It's a slow kind of build with the heat. All right. That's looking good. And it's smelling even better. Now, let's see. I'm going to grab my beer and one special ingredient. We're going to put some cumin seeds in. Now, these are a lot stronger than just the cumin powder, so we don't want to overdo these. So y'all can see. So you can't see a ton of them. I'm going to put a few more in a bit after I mix them. The rest of the garlic. I like to add a little bit of corn, not a lot. I don't want the water in here, so I'm going to empty that out. So just so you can see, that's most of 1 can for 4 things of chili. My warm beer. It's probably enough. That's about 3/4 of that. And heavy cream. Now this makes a big difference. So I probably put close to a cup of heavy cream just now. I mean, I don't like measure it, but about a cup. So just for perspective, everything I'm doing here is ×4 for a normal recipe. Normal recipe, I might do like, you know, 1/4 cup or so. Just a little bit to give it some thickness, some creaminess to it. I know y'all can't smell, but this smells incredible right now. This smells really, really good. All right, I've got this nice and mixed in. I'm going to turn the heat to like a medium low. And what I'm going to do is I want to find a lid and let this simmer for about 45 minutes. And then I'm going to split it. And I'm going to put some peppers in that one. It's probably some scorpion peppers. And then let it simmer for a little bit while longer, maybe another 20 minutes. And then that'll be it. Basically, with the simmering part, I want to make sure there's no more beer left, or no more alcohol from the beer. At the end, it should have a nice thickness to it. You don't want it to be watery, right? And that's one of the things I found the heavy cream works with. and why I drained the water from the cans of Rotel and corn and all that. So anyways, I'll be back for part 2 to see the end results.